First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And I wanted to talk about how the Cascade Rail Foundation got started. And if you are looking to do a large object preservation project, um, sometimes it can be a rather daunting task, whether it be a locomotive or a depot, in doing things, and often your passions kind of run ahead of your motivations, and you tend to end up doing things that you probably shouldn't do. And so in learning grassroots preservation efforts, I made a lot of mistakes when we started the Friends of the South Cle Elum Depot. And we started the Friends of the South Cle Elum Depot back in 1999, and then that evolved into the Cascade Rail Foundation about 5 years later in 2004, 2003, somewhere in there. I was really hoping that we would have Mary Pittis here today, the treasurer of the Cascade Rail Foundation, but I'm really happy to see one of our other founders, which was Mark Borleske. Say hi, Mark. And and I also want to introduce to you David Newcomb. David Newcomb was our historic architect on the project. Um, Mary is golfing. Okay. The woman's got her priorities, Mark. um, so if you most of you guys are old enough to, before social media was social media, they had, if you had groups of interested people that wanted to come together around a particular topic, you met through what's called a listserv. And there was a rail lines west Milwaukee Road listserv, and I got on there along with a number of other folks, and we would exchange emails with each other. And before the days of Facebook, um, and on that rail listserv, the topic of the preservation of the South Cle Elum Depot came up. And it was probably David Newcomb that brought it up in the first place and said, "Hey, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but we've got this gem out in Cle Elum, and quite frankly, I don't think it's going to last one more snow load. The roof is absolutely and completely deteriorated, and somebody should contact Parks about that and see what they're going to do about it." So before we even had our first meeting, I was working, I had my consulting firm at that time was called Holter Historic Research. It's now Cultural Reconnaissance, but I did get in touch with the park planner, Brian Hovis. I had invited Brian Hovis to participate in this conversation today, but he informs me that he's too busy road biking across Spain, you know, to be here today. It's one of those first world problems I guess we have to deal with. But Brian, I called Brian Hovis and I said, Brian, I've got a group of guys and we're concerned about the Cascade, or about the Cle Elum Depot, and that it probably won't survive another snow load. What is Parks going to do about your resource to prevent it from collapsing in on itself? And he said, well, he goes, I said, is there some type of funding priority for this type of work? And he said, yeah. He said the Cle Elum Depot is on the list, and it's currently at number 200 on the list of projects for Washington State Parks. And I'm thinking, oh, that's great. We're on the list. I said, how many projects get funded a year? And he goes, 10 to 12. And I was like, oh, no. And he goes, what we really need is we need somebody that's young enough and dumb enough to start a friends group so that we can elevate the needs of the resource before the Parks Commission so that we can bump that up to a higher priority, so that we can get it into the magic number of the top 10, top 12 per funding cycle. And so I went back with the information that Brian gave me. And one of the things that Brian said was that, we need to have a friends group. And two, we needed to have a condition assessment report done on the building. And so I reported back onto the Milwaukee Road Lines West listserv that I had a meeting with Brian Hovis, and that one of the things that we needed to do was to start a friends group. And the other thing we needed to do was to do a condition assessment report. And immediately I got two responses. I got a response back from Donovan Gray, said, "You're not going to be able to do this project without me." And never met Donovan before. But he was right. There was no way we could have possibly have done this project without him. He was had worked in nonprofit organizations in the past and was a phenomenal fundraiser, was able to raise all kinds of money and acquire grants for mostly arts, but other types of cultural programs. And then the other email I got was from David Newcomb. And David Newcomb said, "I'm an architect, and I would love to do a condition assessment report." And so we decided that we should probably sit down, get together, and talk about what the next steps were. And David, do you remember that first meeting?
Yes, at Starbucks in the U District, I think. And,
University Village, yeah.
we took it from there, and yeah, we got things rolling. It was State Parks who gave me an example of what they would like to see, and I improved that very much. And of course, the rest is history. But hi, Mary, how you doing?
Oh, there's Mary. Yep, she's another charter member.
Okay, hello.
You got your round of golf in?
9 holes, anyway.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Not bad.
You can pick up the other 9 after a little bit later.
Yeah, well, that's nap time.
Oh my word. Okay, so anyway, so David and I met at the University Village Starbucks, and I'm like, I've never seen this guy before, and I'm walking around University Village wondering, how am I going to recognize this guy? Well, he sticks out like a sore thumb. How tall are you?
6'6".
6'6". And who's taller? Is it you or Paul Kruger?
Well, I can't remember. Haven't seen Paul in a while.
Yeah, they call Paul tall Paul. So yeah, and so ran into David, and he said, "Hey, look," he goes, "you got a big mouth. Why don't you run the organization and I'll do the work?" And I went, "Gee, thanks, David." And we went from there, and we decided that we would try to find someone that was local who could help us out. And Brian Hovis had told us about Doug and Mary Pittis that ran the bed and breakfast, the Iron Horse Inn B&B at that time. And I made a cold call after our meeting with Starbucks. And Mary, do you remember that first conversation? I don't. You were a little bit reticent about the idea of having a couple of guys from the Seattle area come over and tell you what to do with your depot.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my depot, but Brian Hovis had given me a heads up. He'd stayed with us, so he told us what was going on.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So Mary and Doug graciously decided to hold the first meeting at the inn in their little banquet room, which was a perfect size accommodation for the number of folks there. And I actually found the meeting minutes for the for the very first meeting. And some of the people that were there was myself, David Newcomb, of course, Donovan Gray, Doug Pittis, Mary Pittis, of course, who was the treasurer. Are you still the treasurer now?
Just switching with Jonathan.
Just switching up now. So here's and Mark Borleske was there. Here's a name from your past, Ray Horton.
Yep.
Another guy.
Legal.
Yes. Yeah, I believe he's an attorney in Brainerd, Minnesota.
Yes.
And then from the community, the only person other than Mary that was really engaged very early on was Louis Musso from the Northern Kittitas County Historical Society. And he became incredibly important to the organization as we went along, because we piggybacked on their 501c3 while we were a friends organization, so that we could accept donations and have them be charitable. And in exchange for being adopted by the Northern Kittitas County Historical Society, they took an administrative stipend from every one of the donations. And in the end, I think in something like 4 years, they had raised enough money off that administrative fee to be able to help get matching funds to replace the roof on the Carpenter House. Isn't that right, Mary?
I don't remember the Carpenter House one, but the telephone museum roof.
Oh, it was the telephone museum. Okay.
Yeah.
And then later on, we had another name from your past from the community who got highly involved, and that was Gary Parsons.
Yes. South Cle Elum council person. Yes.
Yeah. And then from Parks, not at the meeting. We didn't have anybody from Parks at the first meeting because we spent an awful lot of time talking about them. We had Brian Hovis was the park planner. Jerry Tays was the park architect. And the park manager was Tim Schmidt. And Mary, is Tim Schmidt still living in?
He retired to Ellensburg. They built a home in Ellensburg.
Oh, okay.
But I just ran into his in a Chamber of Commerce meeting at the depot a couple of weeks ago. His son, Brandon, is now a fire chief in the Ellensburg system. And he said hello and explained who he was. And I said, oh yeah, you look like Tim. So he has this adult son now. What goes around comes around.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of scary when you say that, because a lot of these kids, you knew them when they were just little rugrats. And then you go, you can't be a fire chief. And then you go, oh yeah, that was 26 years ago. Yeah, I guess
that's right. Yeah. Time flies.
Mary, you remember our ranger?
Arnold?
We had two. We had Colleen McKee.
Colleen, yes.
And we had Arnold Hampton.
Right.
Yeah. So that was basically the whole group. Mark, did I leave anybody out? Mary, did I leave anybody out?
Did you mention Doug? Did you mention Doug Bowe, a resident of Cle Elum that was formerly a Milwaukee Road operator?
No, I didn't mention Doug Bowe. And
what was the date of that first meeting? You have the minutes.
September of 1999.
Okay, and we bought the bed and breakfast in March, so we were pretty new at the whole the whole area. Yeah,
I didn't know you had just bought it.
Yeah, we signed the papers on St. Patrick's Day, 1999.
And then who was Jana's dad over at Northern Kittitas County Tribune?
Jack Stoner.
Jack Stoner, yes.
Yeah.
He was very much part of the early days as
very helpful member. Yeah. Yes.
And one of the first things that we decided to do was that we needed to do something not only to secure the roof, because the roof had holes everywhere. David and I, David did most of the crawling around underneath the building and up into the attic, which was kind of an interesting thought considering his size and how little space there was. You found how many different places where the kids tried to burn that building down?
Well, there was at least one area that had a large fire, and I have to plug Mark. Mark was down there underneath the depot helping as well. So, but yeah, there was one fire that was fortunately extinguished early and didn't spread past the roof ceiling. So,
just to follow up with what Dave said, the depot actually had the windows were all boarded up. All the doors and windows were boarded up, and there had been a fire in what's now the restaurant area toward the front door, where there was a hole straight up through the roof, and that hole had brought in the water. There'd been a substantial water leak, and the floor, it was a wood floor. And so in between, so you've got this darkness, you've got this wet, and you've got this wooden floor that's starting to decay, and there are literally mushrooms growing in between the wood floorboards. And that is now tiled over, linoleumed over, and that's a food grade area as far as an area where people eat right now. But it was really deteriorated at the time, and we're very fortunate that we were able to get to it when we did.
So the first year I remember as the hay tarp year.
Yeah.
For the roof.
Yep.
Trying to put the giant hay tarp that we acquired from Ellensburg, and trying to put that on the roof as the wind kicked up. Yeah, I do remember that.
And was Brian Lee a part of that tarping project? I
think so. He was in there. He was in there.
Because I didn't remember meeting him until the day we actually jacked the building up. But he had been working prior to that. I do know that. And Mark was not kidding when he talked about the mushrooms growing on the floor. We had, you could actually run from one side of the depot to the other and slide on the slime that was growing on the floor. And I went in there one day after a snow, and I saw this perfectly round. Remember those Hostess snowballs, the little coconut little cakes that had the little marshmallow topping on them? These were all over the floor, and I was like, what are these? And then I reached over there and I poked it, and I realized it was snow that had dripped down through the ceiling and had made these little perfectly round frozen balls on the floor. It was that's how bad a shape that the depot was when David started his condition assessment report. And but I think the important part is, and I invited Greg Griffith to join us, and I'm afraid that he wasn't able to join because he was a preservation planner. I was hoping somebody could sit in for Brian Hovis, because he really was an important part of this project, and Brian was the coach. I mean, the entire time that we were out there, he said, you've got to do this. This has got to get done. We got to sign this paperwork. We need these grants, filled out. And he had me and David and Donovan, going off in three different directions, as necessary when, as we were pulling together the resources for this organization. Anybody remember the first grant we received of over $1,000? Mary?
Well, Department of Agriculture through the town.
It was Puget Sound Energy.
Uh-oh.
You remember that?
Can you hear me? I don't know. I had this.
No, you kind of fuzzed out there.
Froze up for a second, but it looks like you're back now.
Okay, so the the first big one I remember is the Department of Agriculture, but we had to do it through the town of South Cle Elum.
Mm.
There were others, but that's the first one I remember that was kind of complicated.
But we made, you know, it's really important, you know, and I tell this to people when I talk to them about when they're starting nonprofit organizations, that it's really important that to beat your own drum, because no one's going to do it for you. And so we at every opportunity we tried to get the word out that we were doing stuff. You know, when we were doing announcements, we didn't want to have pictures of a sad and forlorn depot. We always wanted to have pictures of people doing stuff, you know, to show people that there was activity taking place out here. And that first work party was kind of fun, because we had Tim Schmidt gave us Arnold Hampton. I believe that it was that cleanup day that we first met Arnold, and he came over with the Parks dump truck and a credit card, and we were like, woohoo! And I think in that first Saturday we had taken 7 loads to the dump. I mean, it was nuts. Between the time in which the Milwaukee Road had left from Cle Elum and the time that we took over in 1999, there was a 19-year interval, and it had been a junkyard, and it was full of the depot, and inside and out and all over the grounds was completely covered in car parts. And I'm 7 truckloads we filled that day. And the funny thing about it was, I mean, we all left exhausted. And then later that week, I get a phone call from Mary, and she goes, "You're not going to believe this." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "You're on the front page of the paper."
Oh yeah.
For the cleanup.
It was big news in the town of South Cle Elum and the city of Cle Elum.
I was like, the front page? How did we make the front page? So that was a lot of fun. So David, why don't so in cleaning up the place, we kind of made room for you to be able to go in and do your condition assessment report. Why don't you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. That was, you know, I think I remember most was somebody brought like a 10 by 20 tarp, and we got up on the roof, and we went, you know, the whole roof was gone. So we found the worst area, and we put the tarp over that one spot. And I think we have a photograph in the archives of everyone standing there with the small little postage stamp right on this huge, you know, depot roof. But, you know, basically the condition assessment report started right away. I think it was the winter of 1999. And, you know, Doug Bowe was there helping. You know, he helped me get the plywood off the inside of the windows, because Parks put the plywood on the inside. So we pried it off each window. And in one case, there was the nails, the 16-penny nails pulled off the window casing, and lo and behold, there was a photograph of a World War I soldier standing in front of the depot, and we saved that photograph. And you know, it was one of the most unique things about the working at the depot is that little photograph of this man who was photographed at the depot. His photograph was put back in the depot in the front of a window where he stood, and nobody would have found it unless we had pulled off that plywood and that piece of casing came with it. So it was a very unique occurrence, and it told us that, you know, this is the family put this photograph there because that's the last place they saw it. You know, that was pretty significant. So I always think about that soldier and his family there, who is, of course, you know, we couldn't find out who he was, because, you know, how are you going to find that? So that was pretty significant. And, you know, the whole process of getting the condition assessment report was, it's like the old saying, many hands are gold. And we had lots of hands helping, and, you know, you name it, they were there. But I have to share a photograph that I was taken of me at the depot when it was up on, jacked up from the old foundation, which, Russ, I almost killed you when I pulled off part of the foundation and you were standing under it. But you know, it was pretty amazing event just to see the depot jacked up, ready for the new foundation. And you can see the hay tarp on top here, just coming over the eaves. And during this time, I was talking to my structural engineer friend and telling him about the depot. And he said, well, you know, you're going to need a permit set for that new foundation. And I said, yep, that's what we're going to work on next. And he said, well, tell you what, I'll volunteer my time and put your set together. And I have to give credit to Ron Roberts, who is a retired structural engineer here in the Puget Sound area. He volunteered out of the blue. And it was one of those occurrences that just told me that this project's going to go somewhere. So hats off to Ron. And then, of course, the process of, you know, getting the grants and the whole bit was just an amazing process.
Mark, was there any other goodies that you remember that were found in the depot when you guys were rummaging around through there? It seemed to me like every day we were finding something.
Well, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is the way the Milwaukee Road, well, the way the depot plans were when it was a passenger depot and had a restaurant in it, versus the way it finished up. And one thing about the Milwaukee Road did a lot of ad hoc stuff that I thought was kind of interesting. And they ran a wall to extend the train order office, which is a little bit different than it is now. But the wall came out to a window. And so the wall has a 45-degree turn to meet a wall to avoid a window. And I just thought that temporary interior wall was, you know, that's what do you call that? Resourceful railroading. And there were just some interesting things. I'd say that couple artifacts from the depot that really remained were the built-in desk for the train order office, which had like a round, I guess, where you'd put your belly up to with your chair. That desk remained in place with the drawers, and that was basically command central for the train order office and the depot operation. The part of a horseshoe counter for the service was there, including a big bin, a couple of pull-out bins that kind of pivoted. And I assume those were for commodities like flour and sugar, where a restaurant would go through that kind of stuff in quantity. And in the freight room, we're very fortunate to have a little bit of there's some notes, rates for what's known as LCL, less than carload lots or express shipments. And it's like a handwritten rate sheet that was glued to the wall, and it lists names of places. And they're local communities. And one of the places is Laconia. And Laconia is at Snoqualmie Pass. It's near it's on what was known as the High Line. This predates the Snoqualmie Tunnel. And Laconia is essentially that rest stop at Snoqualmie Pass. It's called Traveler's Rest, I believe. And so this is a real interesting artifact from I'm not sure on Snoqualmie tunnels. I'll have to look it up, but I think around 1911 or 1915 or something like that, predates the electrification. So those were kind of fun little things that turned up.
Well, thanks, Mark. I think the important takeaway from getting the Cascade Rail Foundation, to get its evolution from the Friends Group was the fact that the condition assessment report was completed in the first place. It really was a test by Parks to see whether or not we were willing to put our money in our mouth and kind of manifest that into something that was tangible. And that condition assessment report was used over and over again to be able to say, yes, we have the resources and the will to be able to do things for the sake of the preservation of this building. And it really helped to catch the attention of people at Parks like Jerry Tays and convince the park commissioners that we were up for a challenge and that we were willing to do the preservation project the right way. Because once we had all the condition assessment report does is it says, this is what the depot is now, and this is it inventories every door, every window, and its condition. And it was pretty easy for David to do that because almost every door and every window was destroyed for the most part. There was hardly any glass whatsoever still unbroken on that building at that time. And then, we used some of that USDA money to be able to jack the building up. Did you guys remember the contractor that did the work on jacking up the depot? His name was Doty, and I think he was from Yakima, wasn't he, Mary?
Yes.
And
don't forget his children that came along on the job. And I think there was a dog too. I can't remember.
So I don't think that we were the ones that signed the contract for that building move. I think it was Parks, right? Didn't they have to go through a competitive process?
Probably.
And Doty came out to be the low bid contractor, and he's out of Yakima. We don't know him from anybody else, and he shows up with him and about 14 kids ages 18 to 5. And that's when we realized how he got the low bid on the contract, was that he was had all these kids working for him in doing the depot project. And I think Mary was okay with it until the old man had asked one of his sons for a chainsaw. And I think about that time, I thought Mary head was going to explode, because the kid walks over to the truck, grabs a chainsaw, fires it up, and then Doty starts showing him where to cut on the building. And so here's this kid, he's 12, 14, I don't know.
Maybe.
And he's and he's going, and Mary's like, wow. Did you make it through the day that day? I don't know.
I did. And the amazing thing was they lifted it up. We spent weeks putting a big foundation underneath. That's a whole nother story. And then he came back to put it back down on the foundation, and it was within a millimeter. It was amazing that it happened. So he knew what he was doing.
Well, it's one thing to jack it up. It's another thing to put it back down again. And it speaks volumes to your friend David, as far as getting the engineering for the foundation correct, and then having a contractor that knew what he was doing. And I believe it was at that time that I had met Brian Lee, who was and Mary, you've known Brian since he was what, 5, 10, 15 years old?
He hung with Doug's family. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was the neighbor kid that would never go away. And he turned out to be a really great general contractor. And he's like, you're not going to build this without me. Which was kind of like, David's friend who said, you're not going to design these foundations without me. And it really was kind of a stellar team, especially when you consider that when we did put that building back down, it, like Mary said, it came down within a millimeter where it was supposed to go. David, you had something you wanted to say there?
Just the fact that, yeah, that really was an amazing thing for that whole 132-foot long depot to come down on a foundation that was, it was just perfect. It was just amazing. But I do have a photograph. I was thinking of your story of the floor, Russ, and I wanted to share this photograph of the floor being taken up by volunteer. I think this is the local junior high or high school kids who came in and helped take out the old flooring. I can't remember exactly when this was taken, but that was a memorable day to see all of that flooring getting taken out.
I think that was the high school, Mary, don't you think? Then
It was either a high school group, or my niece had a connection with the YMCA, and they did volunteer community projects, and she had them come over from the west side, and there was a group there once or twice, I can't remember, but it might have been that group of kids. They were that age.
That was one of the joys of having Jack Stoner from the Tribune, following us everywhere we went, was because we ended up in the paper quite frequently, and people were keenly interested in what was going on, to the point where even the Ellensburg paper started picking up stories on what we were doing, especially when we had put a foundation under that building, and it was under the building. Remember that, Mark? They had the building sat on mud blocks, and those mud blocks were enormous. I mean, they were like 10 to 12 inches thick, 2 feet wide, about 4 feet long. They weighed a ton apiece, and we did some research as to why the Milwaukee Road would put such a substantial building with a restaurant and everything else on a temporary foundation, and we found out that it was mostly motivated by their willingness to claim that it was a temporary building, and if it was a temporary building, they could avoid county taxes. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So from the condition assessment report, Donovan Gray was able to raise quite a bit of money through a variety of different sources, and we were able to work with Washington State Parks to be able to get a higher funding priority for the upcoming legislative session. We were absolutely totally blessed because Mary can attest to some of the snowfalls that they can have over that winter, over any given winter. And the winter of 99, 2000, you had what, 4 inches of snow over the course of 3 months. It was nuts.
Where normal is 2 feet of snow. So yeah, it was another amazing part of the whole project.
Yeah, so that the hay tarp did its job, and we had to rip off we had to tear off the entire roof, didn't we, David?
Oh yeah, the roof was terrible shape. I think the underlayment, let's see, it was like shiplap. I think that got torn off. So yeah, they did the whole roof, and good thing. And I want to say that I saw a recent photograph of the depot. It looks like they need a new roof now.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully some funds will be raised.
Didn't we get those the shingles in Blaine? Those are grade A fire rated shingles to put on there.
Yeah, north of Bellingham, Deming. There was a big sawmill up there.
Yeah. And
Yep.
good luck finding those suckers now. They are expensive.
Yes. Yep.
And they curl up. So we may have to go away from the historically correct.
Mm.
Well, you
And-
know, they do have fire treated and synthetic products that look pretty good too. So
Yeah,
'cause,
well,
yes,
that'd
we
be
do need another roof
Yeah.
out, you know, in the not too distant future on the depot.
So after we did the condition assessment report, we did the foundation, got Doty out of there and his 12 kids, and then did the roof. Didn't we do a historic structures report after that, David?
I don't believe so. I think unless Parks did it, but I know BOA Architecture took over and did the exterior and interior drawings for rehab, which I think was close to $1 million just for that portion. And of course, Cochrane Electric, we got to give kudos to Cochrane. Amazing, just amazing. And thanks, Mary, for your connection to Cochrane. You know, that was just amazing, really was.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was Doug's brother, Dick, who worked for Cochrane Electric. And
Right.
he convinced them that this was a great community project to be involved in, and they donated the electrical materials and a crew of four to six all the time to rewire the entire building.
Oh, it was incredible. They did such an amazing job, you know.
yeah, it's
Conduit.
a pro level job all throughout. And then we also had Marty Glass. He was a general contractor too, right?
For the foundation, Marty was a family friend, Doug's family friend for a long time friend. And he worked for Mortensen, who did the parking lots at the airport, cement work, big project cement work. And Marty convinced them that it was a great community project, and they sent a crew to teach us volunteers how to rewire and to set rebar and all that.
Set rebar. Yeah, no, we tied a lot of rebar.
Yeah.
So once we had the depot down, we had to do the historic structures report before we could do any of the interior construction. And let's see, what did we do after that, David? When we started in there, we basically started from the museum section and worked our way towards the restaurant, right?
Right. Yeah, there was quite a bit of, you know, the whole interior had to be taken out as well. Here's a photograph of the waiting area and telegraphers area. You can just see it off to the left there. And things had just been painted, new flooring was put down, and the the hardwood flooring, when that got down, I was just totally amazed how good it looked, and that we were able to do that kind of flooring. Where, you know, I know that Milwaukee probably couldn't afford that grade of hardwood, but it was really nice to see. And then I think I've got another photograph of the cafeteria. So let's see if I can share. Yeah, this is just after it had been completed. So yeah, they did a great job. I mean, just throughout the whole building, and then down to the freight room. Of course, they built the new sliding door on the south side because the weather got to it, and that was a huge door on tracks. Did a beautiful job restoring or recreating that based on the existing one. So yeah, fantastic. And of course, I think, you know, later on that the decks got built, and then let's see, there was the exterior landscaping or pathways that were created. But yeah, the whole process of you know, I wish Donovan was still alive. He could tell us about all of the work he did getting the money raised for so many things. It was just amazing.
So thanks for showing that photo. And yeah, kudos to Mr. Gray, who became a colleague of mine later on at the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. But in that last photo you saw, you could see the bar that Mark Borleske had mentioned, that we had found in the original floor plan. That bar was a full horseshoe-shaped bar, and we were kind of lamented that we didn't find the entire bar. But then, the thought occurred to me, we're shifting our priorities from being, single service type cafeteria to families. So why don't we just put the bar, create a soda fountain type bar in there, and that'll create more floor space for seating, for tables for 4, tables for 2, and we actually increase the capacity that way in the dining room.
It did. That was a great thing.
So after we did the restoration, one of the other things we had to do, we hired Flo Lentz at Central Washington University to do the archaeological study. So right. Parks owns, is it a total of 7 acres out there, Mary? Or is it 13?
I want to say 13 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 13 acres out there, and that includes not only the depot and the substation, but it also includes a major portion of the yard all the way out to where the roundhouse was located. And Flo Lentz and a group of anthropology students from Central Washington University did a field analysis of all of the objects that were still on the park's grounds. And after Flo had done the report, she came up to me and she goes, I want to thank you for saving the Ellensburg Depot. And I went, I didn't save the Ellensburg Depot. And she goes, oh yeah, you did. And I said, how did I save the Ellensburg Depot? She said, every time that there would be a front page article on the paper, we would take it down to the Ellensburg city council meeting, and we would hold it up and we would say, God damn it, these people in Cle Elum are getting stuff done. How come we're not doing anything in Ellensburg? So through the PR and the press channels, we were able to shame Ellensburg City Council into taking efforts to preserve the Ellensburg Depot. And at one time, we were actually thought about connecting all the depots along the trail there, Mark, and having them all staffed at one point with telegraphers and things like that for when the John Wayne Trail Riders Association would come through. You want to talk about the trail riders? So it's a big part. You're a big part of that.
Well, the John Wayne Pioneer Wagons and Riders, they got their start in the 1980s, shortly after the Milwaukee Road abandonment, and they're an equestrian group: horse riders, horses, mules, including wagon teams, and they actually persuaded the state legislature, the Washington state legislature, to purchase the Milwaukee Road right-of-way from the bankruptcy trustees of the Milwaukee Road. And at that time, some pieces were already sold off. Unfortunately, a key piece of Rock Lake's right-of-way was sold off in eastern Washington. But for the most part, the right-of-way was purchased by the state, and it was the Washington State Parks pretty much had control of the right-of-way from Cedar Falls near North Bend, just outside of the Seattle watershed, all the way to the Columbia River at Beverly or Beverly Junction. And then Department of Natural Resources had control of most of the right-of-way east of the Columbia River. and the John Wayne Pioneer Wagons and Riders had their uh, annual cross-state ride. And I think they even did some trail work where, for example, where a decked bridge would be missing at a road crossing, somebody brought a caterpillar, and carved out an embankment down and access road up, and that's how that's how the right of way was continued. And since then, the trail, which is now, which was then known as the John Wayne Pioneer, John Wayne Pioneer Trail, it's gone through some transitions. It was known as Iron Horse State Park, Milwaukee Corridor, John Wayne Pioneer Trail, and now it's got the unifying name of the Palouse to Cascades State Park Trail, which extends from Cedar Falls all the way to the Idaho state line. And uh, and the trails received a lot of support, especially in the Snoqualmie Pass area down to Cle Elum. It didn't receive a lot of love in eastern Washington, where there was a bit of opposition to the trail. Local farmers opposed that. And so in 1995, in 19, let's see, no, let's see, 2015, efforts were made to shut down the trail. And uh, that's a whole long story in itself, but I call it the law of unintended consequences. The efforts of some conservative legislators in Eastern Washington to completely shut down the trail in Eastern Washington had the opposite effect. It brought attention to the trail, and it also brought a thought, we have a trail that crosses the entire state, and I didn't know about it. And so the results of that effort to close the trail resulted in, for example, the Beverly Bridge across the Columbia River was reconstructed and is a recreational trail, as well as the Tico Trestle in eastern Washington, as well as that wonderful trestle over Interstate 90, the Renslow Trestle,
Yeah.
and these and so there's been a noteworthy improvements made to the trail that helps connect it, and it goes right by the Cle Elum people, which I hope will be the resource center for information and heritage of the entire trail.
And about once a year, the John Wayne Trail Riders Association would do a work party at the depot, and that's how we met Terry and Marlene Wade. And they would Terry would bring out his little farm traco and help to clean things up and grade things and move sticks of rail around and stuff like that. It was really a wonderful thing, and he became a really great volunteer for the organization for many years. George, do you have a question?
Yes, I did it real quick for Mark. So since I used to run the washi there on the UP, when I was last up through there, in fact, my very last trip before I retired, the overhead at Marengo was still there. Is it still there, and is it used as part of the trail?
When you say overhead, I do you mean
Yeah, so
viaduct?
as the Milwaukee went over the top of the UP coming
that
into,
concrete?
yeah,
Okay,
in
that
Marengo.
that what George is talking about is a concrete, almost a tunnel-like bridge where the UP ducks under the Milwaukee Road west of Marengo before the interchange, and that is still in place. And I believe you can clearly see the build date um,
Probably
pressed in on the
1914 or
concrete.
something like that.
Kept in the concrete. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's there. That's in place.
Okay, do you know if that part that goes over the UP is that part of the trail still?
Yes, it is. This is an area. Um, there was a major detour because a viaduct, a steel viaduct over Cow Creek,
Yeah.
The Milwaukee Cow Creek Bridge was removed. It was scrapped, and it's kind of a remote spot. So between Ralston and Marengo, uh, uh, a number of groups, including the Palouse Cascades Trail Coalition, arranged with a private rancher so that the trail and trail riders can detour off the railroad right of way and actually go down through the Cow Creek Valley, down on the lower side, and come back up and go to Marengo. So yes, in short, the answer, yes, that is part of the trail.
Okay.
So we've been
Thank
at
you.
it about an hour now. I got a question for David and Mark and Mary. If you had to do it all over again, would you do it again, David?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, it was, uh, labor of love. Milwaukee was such a unique railroad, using electricity to get their equipment freight over the passes. It was just an amazing feat. All the work and extra work, I should say, in all of the buildings, like the substations, the bridges, was just incredible. I mean, it was beautiful workmanship and design. Just incredible, very unique railroad. I'll just leave it there. I would do it again, and yes.
Mary, what do you think?
Yes, we would, Doug and I would certainly be involved in that we were part of the National Historic District, Bunkhouse for the Railroad Workers, and it was an integral part of our community. So of course I would do it again. Plus, my dad, who was a freight agent for the Milwaukee Railroad, he'd passed away by then, but kind of in his name, certainly carry on the Milwaukee road history.
I miss Doug's dad.
Oh, Doug's dad? Yeah, he lived with us the first 2 years. Yes, yeah.
That he was a World War II fighter pilot, right?
He worked on the. He'd like to say, he'd like to claim not outright that he was a pilot, but he worked on the planes.
He worked on the planes. Oh, okay, all right. Anyway, he was a lot of fun. It was a very interesting cat. Mark, would you do it again?
Oh, yes. Actually, my role as far as the depot is concerned, I wasn't really very much of a hammer and nails guy, but I did a lot of research and I sought out a lot of information. And one thing that the short answer is yes, I do it again. That the research that I did, the one thing that's amazing is the more you dig at a subject, you'll find photographs that suddenly turn up. If the word's out that something's going on, and you find, you know, the photographs that we've got are just incredible, and all sorts of different collections, and that was just really a blessing to get that, as well as the oral histories that went along with that. Chris Scarlett, who hasn't been mentioned, he was involved in an oral history project locally, and they've gained a lot of information from people that many Milwaukee railroaders that have passed on over the years, but just wonderful people like Gene Lawson, for example, just a wonderful source of information, and other Milwaukee railroaders who the Catalanich brothers. Am I pronouncing that right, Mary? Catalanich?
Katalnish, yeah. George.
Right. A family that was very much involved in the Milwaukee Road out of South Cleelum. So yeah, it's been a very fulfilling project, and it's led to many other things there.
So there's, I guess the elephant in the room is the substation, and we spent about $900,000 on the depot. The I don't recall what the last estimate was to do restoration work on the substation, but it eclipsed that by a mile. Mary?
Yeah, Love and Good and company did the critical assessment, is there any rebar in the brick and how much is there, that kind of thing, and made a laundry list of things that have to be done to make it safe for the public to use it.
Well, Herrera and
Yeah,
Associates,
probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15
It was
years ago.
2008.
Yeah. 2008, yeah,
Yeah,
long time.
something like that.
Yeah.
We've got a copy of it
Yes.
at the office.
Herrera Environmental Services went in there and did the cleanup initially. And I believe, was it John Fluke that paid for that?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's been the people in the white uniforms and hazmat people have been in there 3 times, I think. But yeah, John Fluke would have done one of them. Parks did the others, I think.
just a John Fluke was an industrialist. He was very much in the forefront of electronic instrumentation and electronics, and he had a fascination with railroading and especially electric railroading. And at one time, he owned the substation, and so he did the remedial work at the substation before it was turned over to Parks, if I recall. And we have him to thank for making that wonderful brick building intact or relatively intact. It has no electrical equipment in it, but yet the structure is standing and in fairly secure shape.
Yeah, he John Fluke and also Gary Parson, who was sat on the South Cle Elum Town Council, and he when many of the brick substations, like up at Hyack and elsewhere, were being dismantled to recycle the brick, they came in to get a permit from the town to do the demolition at the substation, and Gary Parson told the clerk to tell him that they needed a long list of permits, and they just went on down the road and started work on another one, and that's what saved the substation. Then Parks took an interest and it didn't get demolished like many of the other ones did.
So Mark and Mary, are you both still on the board? Is that correct?
Okay.
And are there any plans to get the substation to a point where the public would be allowed in?
Only if the state of Washington wants to make a line item in their budget, because you're talking millions. Yeah.
It would take a public-private partnership.
Before the Milwaukee Road Historical Association convention in Yakima, I believe that was in 2015. We wanted to have a guided tour through the substation. We worked with a risk assessment manager of state parks as well as a local ranger, and we went through we did a walkthrough of the building, and we were given permission to have the substation open for tours, and so we did have a guided tour through the substation. We had some areas fenced off because inside what's known as the motor generator room, that's it. If you see the photo behind me, the motor generator room is would be that front room that with the peak roof there. The motor generator room has what is equivalent to being an open elevator shaft. You could just you could just go right down to the sub basement, which is a terrifyingly dangerous situation. So we have to secure and fence off part of that area. And the other thing is all the broken glass and Parks remediated the bird droppings inside the substation, and that was professionally done. And we've also had the windows of the substation screened up. So there's board up plywood on the ground floor, and they painted it a tasteful brick color. On the second set of windows are wired off to hopefully keep the pigeons and the other birds from getting in. One of the problems is that it's a brick building in an earthquake zone. So apparently, earthquake proofing and some sort of structure, metal structure for stabilization might be needed. If you want to see an example of that, the Renton substation, which is now an office building, went through that kind of rehabilitation. Although Renton, the substation was because of the height of the building, they were able to add extra floors in the building for office space, which was practical from a real estate standpoint, not necessarily a historical preservation.
So there you go. I'm just going to squeeze in just for a second, Russ, just to ask Mark, can you remind us about the upcoming John Wayne Trail Riders visiting Cle Elum, and then let us know quickly some of the projects that you're working on the trail.
Okay. The John Wayne Pioneer Wagons and Riders, their premier event is called the Cross State Ride. It doesn't go across the entire trail because right now Snoqualmie Pass is the snow melt is always a X factor. So they start at Easton and they continue toward the Idaho state line. The trail ride will, and excuse me, I'm bringing out my calendar.
I believe it's the Friday before Memorial Day this year.
Right. Okay, so right. So on May 22nd, they'll be at Easton for the start of the ride. They will overnight in the rail yard or outside of the rail yard at South Cle Elum, and that's Friday the 23rd. And then they continue. For example, they go about 20 miles a day, which is a good pace for horses. It's an easy pace for bicyclists so Cle Elum, Thorpe, Kittitas, Renslow for Memorial Day, and Beverly on the 27th of May, and then they continue on, ending up in Tico, Washington for what they call the White Scarf ceremony, where if you rode every day and every mile of the trail, you would get a white scarf as a
memento,
as a badge of courage or certificate of completion.
Certificate of insanity.
And that is June 8th in Tico, Sunday, June 8th. So it really it's about a 3-week trip, and it's really an event wherever the riders appear. There's a lot of local groups that come out and help provide potlucks or fundraising dinners and entertainment, and it's quite an amazing thing to see this eastbound wagon train going across the state on the Milwaukee Road right of way.
It's just an armada of campers and trailers and all that stuff. George, go ahead.
I was just gonna say to Mark, maybe arrange to have the some of the riders on top of the tunnel there at Marengo as one of our trains goes under. That'd be that'd be probably difficult to arrange it, probably more difficult with the railroad than it would be with the riders.
Well, I don't quite have that, but one of my favorite videos is at Marengo. Um, I'm I've videoed an oncoming Union Pacific westbound train, and as the power goes by, and the camera is perfectly still, and I just turned the camera a little bit, and you can see the back of the head of two horses on the team.
Neat. All
So
right.
it's horsepower meeting horsepower.
There you go.
There you go. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. We're getting towards the bottom of the hour, but Mark, just quickly, a quick rundown on some of the trail projects that you're doing this summer, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, a big project that I'm involved in, if you can see behind me, this is like the weatherman. You see the Cle Elum sign behind me over my shoulder. Uh, we've been putting up station signs. This is a project that Dan Brady started. This sign was installed in the year 2000, and we've continued to put station signs at strategic location and name points on the trail. When we wrap up, and this year we're really have an ambitious effort. We're going to put signs between Cle Elum and Renslow, and then we're going to jump across the Columbia River, including Beverly and places on Crab Creek, as well as station signs up on both sides of Snoqualmie Pass as weather permits. Our big station sign project is going to come up the weekend of May 17th and 18th. That's in commemoration of Mount St. Helens eruption. We're going to start out at Cle Elum, and we're going to install signs eastbound toward Crab Creek.
Excellent.
Also,
Go ahead.
not my project, but Mike Turcott is involved with a signal crew to install a signal at a location called Ralston. They've salvaged a searchlight signal, a single lens signal, and rehabilitated, and they'll be planting that signal hopefully in the month of May and get it ready by the summer at Ralston, which is south of Ritzville and north of Washtukna and east of Lind.
There you go. Well, Russ, we've had a pretty fun little get together. David, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you, being a member of Cascade Rail Foundation, the next generation. Like I say, it's just a pleasure to meet you and to learn about all the trivial, everything that you guys went through. And, as we work on the depot and the substation cooperative agreement and all that jazz, it's just inspiring to me to hear the stories, and from my friends that are on the board today, just to get some more background on what all went on. So yeah, this was an interesting program. And my fellow board members, I've got some breaking news. Moments before I got on the call today, I received a phone call from Miles Keogh, and he had really good news. So that's a bit of a spoiler alert for next time. Russ, you got anything more before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to thank David and Mark and Mary for making the time to kind of reminisce about the good old days, and that it was a project that is near and dear to all of our hearts. But it's if you think you can get a depot rehabilitation renovation done in 6 years, you're probably need to just double that because it costs way more money and more time than we ever imagined.
Yeah. So normally these programs do go on YouTube later in the afternoon. And actually, Russ, it's kind of interesting that the previous week on April 9th, we had George Lee, And George Lee was talking about this very same topic in the preservation of the Cheney Depot,
Cheney
former
Depot,
Northern Pacific Cheney Depot. So, I mean, it's kind of, it's just our depot time. So, a special thanks again to David, Mary, and Mark. Mary, how did you shoot today?
When
I'll
I
just-
do 9, it's the same as if I had done 18.
There you go. Okay.
Double the strokes. Yeah, it's
So-
more recreation than anything else.
Jonathan, you bring up a really good point. If it hadn't been for Cle Elum, Cheney wouldn't exist. And the
Nor
same
would
way
Ellensburg,
same,
nor would Kittitas.
nor Kittitas, nor Morton.
Right.
All those depot projects relied upon the success of Cle Elum to prove the concept could be done. There were other depot projects out there that did get done that were not necessarily associated with Cle Elum. I could think of Duval and Carnation; those just kind of formed on their own. But Morton and Ellensburg and Cheney, they all Kittitas, all of them owe a nod of thanks to the work that was done by David Newcomb and Mark Borleske and Mary Pittis in saving the Cle Elum Depot.
A group of true pioneers, dear friends, and just a comment from my dear friend Doug Andreessen. Now we need to work on the depot at Stillicum.
Works for me.
There you go. Fantastic. We are just coming up to the bottom of the hour. I'm just going to check quick, see if we've got anything. Anybody in the audience has got anything they want to add on today's program? Otherwise, we're going to move to adjournment. Gary Tarbox, go ahead, please.
I might say, along with that, the trail rider group, I know from personal experience with our bike riders, Jack and I forged our way on the Foothills Trail before it was actually a trail, and it was clear that the trail riders had gone through there and clipped a lot of the stuff out, but they could ride through the mud puddles much better than we bikes could. And then there's also the whole Centennial Trail north of whatever that one road is, 92nd or something, when they went on down to Edgecombe. We went through that before it was a trail, and the trail riders had obviously been through there. So it just...
Well, and just to follow up on that, Russ, talk about pioneering, just like our trail, the Palouse to Cascades Trail, is one of the most popular in the state. The state then went on to implement that. Isn't there now another trail in the Willapa Hills that was patterned off of a right-of-way, just like our project was? So,
and that actual railroad was never actually built. A lot of that was not built.
Just a right-of-way.
It was the right of way, and it was a logging spurs or logging roads, but it didn't connect. It was the old Columbia and Grays Harbor Railroad, a railroad authorized by the Great Northern.
Interesting.
And we have complete maps of that at the archive, by the way.
Archive, of course. And Russ, I will just reemphasize for our audience that this is the Give Big season, and of course, everybody that you see on camera, including your host and moderator, is a volunteer for the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive. And your support goes to preserving and presenting the collections that have been made. And of course, when we talk about pioneers, one of these days we'll have to sit down with pioneer Gary Tarbox and talk about how archives get started. So hats off to Gary and Russ and Mary and Mark and Joan. No,
David.
I know. I'm sorry. So May 7th, Dr. Frank Shear will be talking about RPO cars going to Wallace, Idaho on the Union Pacific. So should be an interesting program. And Doug just says, let's hear it for Gary Tarbox. And of course, Gary, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. So, and Mark, yes, there is an assessment. Oh, there is an assessment document on the substation. Okay, good deal. David, like I say, it was a pleasure to meet you, sir. And at this point, I'm going to say to everybody, it's absolutely glorious day here in West Seattle. The sun is shining, the birds are singing. It's probably the warmest day since the last ice age. So I'm going to go out and march the dog around and look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks at our next program. So that is it for today's program. Your host and moderator, Jonathan Fisher, saying bye for now. So.